Welcome to Porsche Patter with Bracken Helms, the show where we hear Bracken and his distinguished guests from the Porsche community patter on about Porsches and all things automotive. Porsche Patter is sponsored by Circuit 64. Circuit 64 creates authentic automotive apparel made for like-minded automotive enthusiasts. The links for Circuit 64 are in the show notes. Okay, let's get to it.
Jerry Woods, Part 4. Some of the things you'll notice in this episode are annoying shop noises in the back that I couldn't get rid of. At one point, we're talking about car prices, and I talk about like the Boxster 996. That ship has sailed, but even at that time, prices are already increased. When he talks about being at Rennsport Reunion 1, and a driver comes by and says, "Oh, I drove that car. I didn't get it in audio," but he was talking, the driver was Vic Elford. That would have been nice to get on there. He talks about he wish he would have got his degree. I say we start a petition for Jerry Woods. I mean, he's done more than most people have, and he just didn't write that paper. Let's contact his school and demand that he gets his degree. All right. Anyway, here's part 4. SC or Carrera 3.2?
I don't like the SCs had CIS fuel injection. The Carrera, when they came in 84, or probably an 84 Carrera, that's probably the better choice. They came out with a Motronic, and that was, proper way of injecting fuel in the car.
I have an 85, and my dad, like I said, he's a Porsche broker, and
they're good cars. 84, 85.
He's SC live or die.
No, they have that CIS. It's a glorified garden sprinkler. It has no control over fuel. It just sprays it in there. And if you're lucky, it doesn't pop the air box.
915 or G50?
950.
964 or 993?
Don't know enough about those cars. That's getting too modern.
Okay, well,
yeah.
What do you think of the rise of air-cooled prices?
It's a good thing because it allows people to bring an older car back to life. Yeah. It's like when we started the Spec 911 thing, the concept again of trying to have a customer came to us and said, "I'd like you guys to create an affordable class of race car." And my first reaction was, "That's an oxymoron." And he says, "No." He says, I says, "Well, in Porsche Club at the time there's G-Class. It's a 911 SC." He says, "Yeah, but it's not a race car. You have to keep the carpets in it, and you got to do that. It's not a race car. I want to put fiberglass bumpers on. I want to make it look sexy like a race car." And then that's how the 911 Spec class kind of grew. And so how can we approach it so that it is affordable? Not do crazy things, like I mentioned with the engines and the brakes and the stuff. So that's how it grew. And, my thought process, or our thought process, was the SC. Bruce Anders used to call them jelly bean cars. They're a dime a dozen. There's SCs everywhere, And, he said, the thought process, the perfect owner car would be a 911 SC with 300,000 miles on it. The motor's toast. The springs are coming out through the seats. The paint's falling off of it. It's a perfect owner car because you can rebuild the motor. You can throw the seats away anyway. You can repaint it. It should be, $5,000-$6,000 as a donor? As you know, nowadays, people want $20,000 for that piece of POS, Yeah.
Perfect starter Porsche today?
Probably a Cayman. That's one of those things with water in it. Yeah. But I think, when the Caymans first came out, I thought, that's a modern 914-6.
Some of these cars are getting cheap. Like, you can buy a Boxster and just have fun with it for if you're not worried about the IMS, you can buy it and just risk it for $6 or $7,000.
Exactly.
Even a 996, you can buy one that's not in superb condition. My dad had one shopped to him. It was around Halloween time. It was a nice car, and it didn't have the high. It was close to 100,000 miles, but it was a real nice car. And they bidded 14, and they didn't know if they wanted to pay the 14. I'm thinking 14 for a good car, that's so nothing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is even going to be something you're going to want to dive into, or because you don't really like the new cars, but. I call it the Skyline GTR effect because you're talking the Nissan GTR.
Yeah, I remember that.
So they come out, and whenever they come out, they're they do everything perfect for you. They're like the ultimate car. They're fast. They do everything for you. They're easy to drive, all that stuff. But then, and the magazines all rave about them. They're the greatest things ever. But then like 6 months after, once they get rid of the awe factor, then this car doesn't really have soul. It's the same story. And so I asked people like, well, do you think Porsche's kind of like that now? Some of the new Porsche models?
The one thing that I do know, because we've had customers that had them, and Rich is a good read on this because he's, again, a driver, is the problem with some of the new cars is they're so well behaved that, let's call it the fun factor, doesn't come in until you're like 120 or 130 miles an hour. And then if something goes wrong, it goes wrong big. Where if you got an early air-cooled 911, and we had one customer that wanted us to purposely set one up that would be rear end loose. At 60 miles an hour, I want the car to be loose because that creates fun factor. Going into a corner and having to drive it and steer it and feel the car with your ass. And modern cars, they don't do that. They're so well behaved. All the electronics does everything for you. But when it goes wrong at 130 miles an hour, like we had one that we had to put on the slut bench, it was bent.
Advice for someone that wants to modify their car.
Ooh. People will come in and they want to get more horsepower. They want to chip their engine. They do something like that. Let's say our more common way to approach making a car feel like it's got more power is to change the gear ratios. Put short gear ratios in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and then sixth. Leave the top gear, either fifth or sixth, as an overdrive. But then you have a fun factor stoplight kind of acceleration. You effectively, seat of the pants will feel like you gained a lot of horsepower because when you shift, you instead of going, say, for instance, down to, say, 3,000 RPM when you shift, you only drop to 4,000 RPM, 1,000 RPM less drop on the shift point. You're picking up the difference in power between 3,000 and 4,000, so you're effectively having more power to accelerate with. And it doesn't affect smog. So in modern cars, or cars that have to go to the smog station, it makes more sense to change the gear ratios.
So any apprehensions or fears during your journey?
No.
What gets you excited?
Talking to people, experiencing, like we're doing right now. I go to Rennsport reunion as an example. At the end of 4 days, I'll think, wow, I didn't see any cars, but I saw a lot of friends and a lot of people.
I wonder if I've had a booth at the last two Rennsports, so you may have walked by my booth. Do you have any mentors?
One gentleman, his name was Bill Beekus. His son is actually a TV commentator in racing now. He was a mentor from a way of analyzing engines and etc. Bruce Anderson, maybe. I'd say Bruce was probably a mentor. But one of the things I got involved with Bill was this project. It's not working right now, but this was a slide valve carburation system. And it's seized up because it's been sitting. But he had patents on how this meters the fuel. And if I open this wide open, you'd see there's no venturi in there. And it meters the fuel based on the sonic pulses that are in the intake stack. I spent a number of years working with Bill on developing that. He had actually developed it for his son on a quarter midget engine.
Okay, if you could interview or talk to anybody, who would it be?
In the Porsche world, probably Hans Metzger. I read his book. The guy's a genius. Yeah.
Song you want to play while driving?
Hole in the Wall, or what was the Pink Floyd's song from the Wall? I can't remember the name of it right now. Pink Floyd was a band I liked a lot. Matter of fact, when I did the Carrera Panamericana race, I think it was in 91, it wasn't a race, it was a recreation of that event, and you went day to day, and it was more run like a rally. One night we spent in a hotel in Oaxaca, and I came downstairs in the morning, and David Gilmour and Mason, the drummer, sitting in there in the lobby having a coffee, and I was just like, Dave Mason, David Gilmour, and Nick Mason. Wow. I'd seen them when they had one of their first albums came out. They played at Santa Clara.
Best driving route?
I enjoy driving up to Lake Tahoe from here. Highway 80, going up there. Or Highway 88, going over the Sierras on Highway 88. That's a really cool road.
Highlight of your career?
Winning 24-hour races, and there's been quite a few of those, actually. Or actually, sometimes you count the wins at Sebring, too. Those are maybe 1986, winning Sebring with Hans Stuck driving. That was a good event. That was a nice bonus to a career.
Fastest you've ever driven, where at? What car? Why?
89 Speedster, the Canepa car, Highway 1, testing it.
Okay. Favorite auto publication?
Auto Week used to be really good. I used to like
Auto Week. I used
Week.
to subscribe to Auto Week when I was a little kid for my dad. Have you ever seen 000?
I do. I get 000. Matter of fact, the latest one out is a really good issue. It has, because it's a lot about that Gamoon coupe that was owned by. I have seen your moments.
Yeah, when it was red.
He lived in Los Altos. Chuck Forge.
Yeah.
And I knew Chuck. He and I used to chat and share stuff. Matter of fact, I had Chuck co-drive when I built the first car for the Carrera Pan America event in 91, and I put dog box. I had Webster 5-speed dog box in the 356s, and we took them to Mexico to run them. We went to Sears Point and had Chuck Forge test drive them, and he gave him the thumbs up, and he says, "Man, I wish I could have that transmission in my 914 4 that he ran in E-production." He says, "It shifts so much better than a Porsche box." But
when I first met Pete Stout, we were talking about Rennsport Reunion, and we were talking about how we thought 4 was so much more intimate and so much nicer than 5. Obviously, this was before 6 blew it all out of the water. And he started telling me the story about how he just walked up to this beat up old trailer with this historic car, the Chuck Ford's car, and just sat there. And then all of a sudden Chuck started talking to him. That car is so legendary. And I didn't know at the time. He's like, yeah, Rob Embry has it now. And they found out it's Le Mans car, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. But actually, the first Rennsport Reunion was the best. And it was really small and intimate. And that
4 was the first one I went to, so it was already pretty big.
That was at 1. We were there with a car that we'd done here for More Speed. It was a 908. We had the car. It wasn't with my shop, but with Dave Morris, who was the owner of this whole thing, and I was just this little corner. And I'd help work on that car, and we had it on display. And all of a sudden, cigarette smoking guy comes walking by, and he stops and he looks at the car. I drove that car at Targa Flora. It was a factory driver. And he's like, wow. There were a lot of really cool things. We'd had a 917-30 that we took back, that we'd restored.
If you could do a redo in life, what would it be?
Oh, boy. Those are these forks in the roads as you go along, and you'd say, hey, if I'd done this, I would have done this or that. I went to University of Santa Clara, and I studied mechanical engineering, and in Santa Clara, to get a degree in mechanical engineering, even a bachelor's degree, you had to write a thesis. And because growing up, somewhere in my educational process, when I had to sit down and write something, it was like running into a brick wall. I freeze. I can't do it. There's a hurdle for some reason. And so at Santa Clara, I never wrote my thesis, so I never completed my degree. I had all the courses, put in all the time, did all the studying, but never got parchment to hang on the wall. I started going to school there as a physics major. I was really good in math, and I enjoyed physics, but we would go up to Berkeley on days. In Santa Clara, we had Wednesdays or extracurricular days, so we'd go to Berkeley for studies, or if you had a bachelor's degree in physics, basically, you were a peon working for some dude, that was trying to get his PhD. And I realized if you wanted to do anything in physics, you had to get a PhD. And I didn't see myself as being a perpetual student. So I thought, well, I better change majors. So I changed to mechanical engineering, which afforded me a lot of learning. But in hindsight, I should have switched majors to be a math major and, say, minored in mechanical engineering, because as a math major, you didn't have to write a thesis. And I could have got a degree. Now, what would I have done with a degree that was any different? Okay. I've been able to do this career and enjoyed it. And, I'm not a rich man, but I enjoyed what I've done. And I had a degree. What would have been different? Well, when I was living in Germany for 2 years, and I thought I might have wanted to stay there, in Germany, if you wanted to own a shop, you either had to have what's called a Meister's brief or a degree from a university. So I could have started a shop in Germany with a degree, but to start a shop as just a lowly mechanic, you can't do that in Germany. You have to go through this whole journeyman. You have to be in the trades union and play that kind of a game. So, yeah, and there was a period in time where if I'd wanted to stay in Germany, I enjoyed Germany. It was a lot of fun. I would have been better off with a degree, and you would have been Germany had at that time, I don't know if it's still true, very structured kind of almost a class system. And as a mechanic, you were treated differently than as a person that was a shop owner or a degreed person. Different than here in the States. Very, very different. That was one period in my life that I thought, oh man, I wish I'd had a degree. But then my good friend Gary Walton, Rich's dad, would tell me, Jerry, you've had a great life. You've traveled, you've seen all these. Well, I've seen a lot of racetracks and a lot of airports. People will say, well, all these travel, you see the airport and a racetrack, But I have traveled, So I've seen some of the countries. Had the opportunity, like I say, to live for a year and a half in Germany, almost 2 years, and experience a different culture, which, unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the States that they don't do that, and I think it stunts their growth.
If you could change anything about yourself, what would it be?
I'd lose weight. I really enjoy good beer. And it doesn't really do good for my body sometimes. But
do you have any fears?
I don't like to go fast.
If you could go back in time to visit, what time period would you go to?
I'd have to. I don't know if I can answer that right now. There's some innovative times in history that were pretty neat. The automotive engineering that came out in the 1920s was pretty interesting. There was a lot of innovative design and engineering that was done in the 1920s, but they didn't have the metallurgy there was a lot of stuff that people had concepts. The metallurgy didn't exist or computers didn't exist, So how both those things have affected the industry big time.
What's the hardest thing you've ever done?
Physically is a bicycle ride called the Death Ride. The people that put that on would rather have it be called the Tour of the California Alps. But it's a bicycle ride that's it's up in the Sierras. It's a one-day event. It's 129 miles and 16,000 feet of climbing, and I did it.
So you're a cyclist?
Yeah. I started cycling and then got really into it after my dad passed away. And I tell this because he had a heart issue. And I say it's how to stay away from visiting the cardiologist.
What is your prized possession?
Probably my bicycle.
Any other crazy or exciting stories you have not told me?
Another crazy 24-hour race that we did was at a track called Nelson Ledges. And the pit lane had been poured like the week before, and the asphalt was still soft, and you had to pit on top of sheets of plywood. Because if you tried to jack the car up with a floor jack, it would sink into the asphalt. And then the track was breaking up in the middle of the night. The drivers would call in and say, hey, I need to talk to the other co-driver because I need to know which way to go around the pothole. Do you go around the pothole to the left or the right? And then the car owner, one night, in the middle of the night, he's on the radio and he said, Jerry, I got to pit. You got to adjust the headlights. I go, Paul, we'll adjust the headlights when you stop for fuel. They're not going to just come in and adjust. No, I can't. Paul, when you stop for fuel, we'll adjust the headlights. Okay. So after the race, he said, okay, Woods, get in the car. You're coming with me in the rental car. I'm going to show you why I wanted to adjust the headlights in the middle of the night. I want to show you this pothole. So we drove around out to the track, and the pothole was probably 4 feet wide, about 6 feet long, and about 8 inches deep. I mean, it wasn't a pothole. It was, you could have sunk the car in it, And he goes, I needed to see where the guy was going. Well, we won the race, so, in the end result, it was okay. There's myriads of stories like that from racing that we've done.
What would you like people to know about you?
The biggest thing is I really want to be fair to people. Fairness and honesty is really important.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, comment, like, and share with your friends. Feel free to send questions or suggestions to the email in the description of the show. Special thanks to our sponsor, Circuit 64. Goodbye for now. We hope we can get together again for our next episode. Now get out there and enjoy the cars and the people.